All right, here we are back for another video. Hopefully you still have the packet that we were using yesterday. We got through page 3. And if you remember, my goal was to, what were we trying to do? We were writing a method called calculate modes that's going to return an array containing the mode or modes found in the parameter tally. Just a quick review. Remember, tally is an array that says how many times each of these individual data values occurs. So 2 occurs 10 times, 3 occurs 5 times. And remember, I showed you this yesterday too. These are like the actual data values. So if you had this list of data, you'd see that the modes are the ones that occur most often. Those are 2, 4, and 11. And we can see that in the array just by looking at which numbers correspond with the highest frequency, which in this case is 10. Okay, so yesterday we came up with this whole outline of what we needed to do to write this method. First, we needed to know, I'm reading right here, needed to know how many modes there were. So call find max to get what the actual max frequency is. So I need to figure out, okay, what's the biggest number in this array? It's 10. Okay, now that I know that, I need to know how many times does that occur? Well, I looked up here and I counted 1, 2, 10 occurred 3 times. So I'm going to have to go through the array, counting how many times the value of it equals 10. I needed to know that so I can make a new array of that size. So that's going to hold all my modes. Then I'm going to go through the array and fill it with the actual modes, the data values. And remember, the data values that I want to fill it with are the indices whose correspond to a data value of 10. So looking through the array, anytime I find a 10, the index of that spot is getting added into that array, 2, 4, and 11. That's my array of modes, so then I can return it. All right, so that's where we're picking up. So if you look over to this next page of your packet, where we actually write it, I'm going to keep kind of flipping back and forth so that we write the code according to what we said we were going to do yesterday. Okay, so first off, it's a public int bracket bracket. We have to return an integer array because I don't know how many modes there are going to be. Maybe this is going to be an array of size 1, which is then going to be kind of a dumb array. But in case I need to return multiple modes, like in my example, I need it to be an array and not just an integer. Okay, so we said the first step was need to know how many modes there are. So call find max to get what the max frequency is. So if you remember from yesterday, there was this other method in the stats class called find max that I'm allowed to use. And that's just going to give me the maximum value in this array. So it's going to return 10 in my example. And in general, it's going to return 10 in the tally array. The other thing you want to notice is where is find max? It says find max is a member of the stats class. And here they use s1.findmax, but I don't need that because tally or calculate modes is also a member of the stats class. So since it's in the same class, I can just say, let's say right here, make an integer to store it, call it int max frequency equals, I don't need s1 dot, I can just say find max because it's in the stats class, and that's assuming where calculate modes is also written. And if you look at how find max is supposed to be used, we're supposed to send it an array to find the maximum of, and this is that array, so it's called tally. So tally has to get sent over. Okay, so now we know it's 10. So my next step, I told you I'm going to keep flipping back here. My next step is to figure out how many times does that max occur. So now that I know max is 10, I got to go through that tally array and count how many times 10 happens. So what am I going to need in order to do that? I'm definitely going to need some sort of accumulator. So I'm going to call this int num modes because that's really what I'm calculating. How many times 10 occurs is how many modes there are. So int num modes, initially that's going to be 0. Then I have to go through the tally array, and every time I find a value equal to that max frequency, I want to add 1 to num mode. So what am I going to use for that? For loop. So for int I equals 0, I is less than what? We're going through tally, so tally dot length I plus plus, and I'm looking for the value inside each spot. So if tally bracket I equals what? Equals that max frequency, the 10 in my example, but whatever the max frequency is. If those are equal, what do I want to do? Well, I found another mode, so num modes has to go up. So I can just say num modes plus plus, or num modes plus equals 1 if you prefer. Okay, so now I know how many modes there are. What did I say I was going to do next? If I flip back quick, step 3 was declare a new array of that size. So now I know how many modes I need to return. I can make an array to return that's that big. So that's going to be an integer array, int bracket bracket. I'm going to call it mode array. Equals, how do I declare an array? I say new int, and what's the size going to be? Well, it was 3 in my example, but in general, it's whatever num modes come out to be. Okay. Almost done. What's next? Let's double check. Step 4, we got to fill the array with the modes. Those are the indices whose data values are 10. So what am I going to need to do? Well, again, I need to go through this tally array looking for when I get to a 10. When I do, the index of that spot, the I value, has to go in that array. Okay, so we have a for loop. For int I equals 0, I is less than tally.length. One more time. I plus plus. It's going to look very similar to the last one. If tally bracket I is equal to max frequency. Okay, I've found one of those 10s again. What do I want to do? Okay, well, I want to set, the first time I find it, I want to set the 0 position in mode array equal to that first index. The next time I find it, I got to set position 1 equal to the next index, et cetera, et cetera. So I also kind of need another variable here. I got to keep track of where I am in mode array. So it's not going to be the same as this index value. That's the one that's getting stored there. So I actually need to add before this for loop something called int position. I'm going to start that at 0. So the first time I found it, position's at 0, I can say mode array bracket position equals what? What would I want to set that first spot equal to? Well, in my example, I'd want to set the first spot equal to 2. And again, that's the index variable where 10 occurred. So what's the index variable where that max frequency occurred? It's I. So mode array bracket position equals I. What else do I need to do in here? Right, I got to get ready to put the next position in. So we have to do position plus plus. So the next time I don't overwrite that first position and I put it in the second position instead. Okay, now what? We've only got one thing left. We've got everything set. I'm supposed to return an integer array, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to return mode array. And I'm done. All right, so there it is. Took a while to get through. Hopefully it makes sense because we really planned it out. If you had any confusion or got lost at any part of the way here, pause the video and have me come over. Before we go on, just think about how you would use this because it's a little weird. It's a public int bracket bracket, right? It's an array. So if you were going to call this somewhere, let's say I was over in the driver or something, and I wanted to use this, I couldn't just say S1 dot calculate modes tally, because what would that do? It would kind of do nothing. It would return an array to this spot, but then there's nothing happening to that array. It's not doing anything to it. You probably want to set it equal to another array. If you said int bracket bracket, I don't know, m equal to that, it might look a little weird because normally we don't declare arrays without saying new int or whatever size we're going to make it. But I can initialize an array to a list of values, and that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm turning back this list of values. That's what m is going to be equal to. So you still have to do something with what gets returned. Okay. Let's go finish off this packet then. We're still going to do the same kind of stats class. Part B says you will write the method kth data value, which is also in the stats class. Kth data value returns the kth data value when the data values are considered in sorted order. Recall that the indices of the array represent possible data values and that each array location contains the frequency of the number corresponding to it. In the example reprinted below, first 10 data values are 2, the next 5 are 3, the next 10 are 4. If we use the object declaration stats, S1 equals new stats, and called kth data value 1, we get 2. And that's because we're sending it the array tally, and I want, if I were to look at all the individual values, what the first value would be. And I'm thinking back to making it look like this. Here's the first value. It returns a 2. Looks at this one, kth data value 14. If here's all my data values, just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It'd be a 3. That's exactly what it says it's supposed to return. But how would I use this to do it? Well, I counted them one by one on that screen I showed you a second ago, but I don't really need to do that because there's 10 of them here. So here's 10 values, and then here's 5 more. So by the time I get to the end of the 3's, there's 15. But I wanted the 14. So think logically how that would happen. The first 10 are 2's, 1 through 10 are 2's. The next 5 are 3's. If I get to 15, if I surpass that, right when I surpass it must be the type of value that it was. So what would 15 be? Well, there's 10 2's and 5 3's, that would still be 3. But it says 16 returns 4. Because I have 10 2's plus 5 more is 15, plus 10 more is 25. Well, between 15 and 25, I reached that 16. One of those had to be a 4. So that's how I'm going to kind of do this. So we're going to basically keep adding these values up until we're bigger than the value number that I'm looking for, until I'm bigger than k. So how would I do that? Well, I got to keep track of how many numbers I've added so far. So we're going to need some kind of variable called total again. So let's make a variable int total, and we'll start it at 0. Now what am I going to need to do next? We need to start adding up values to see when I get to k. So we need a for loop to get through this loop again, or through this array, for int I equals 0. I is less than a dot length. Oops, I shouldn't use a dot length. That's totally wrong. It's not a dot. What is it? Yeah, watch out for that. It's tally dot. That's a common mistake in the next test too. Make sure you're using the right variable names. I plus plus. Let me go back and check. Did I do that in the last one? Tally dot length. Tally dot length. Yeah, I did it right before. Okay. So what do I want to do? Well, as I go through this, I want to add up what numbers I see here. So let's say I was looking for the, I don't know, the 12th data value, just as an example. What is the 12th data value going to be? There's going to be 10 2's followed by 5 3's, so it's going to be like the second 3, so 12th would be a 3. So first I need to accumulate onto total. So total plus equals what? The value in tally, so tally bracket I. And then what do I need to check? Well, I need to check if I've gone above that K value that I'm looking for, if total has gone above that. When total was 10, I haven't reached the 12th value yet, so I want to keep going. But when total's 15, that means I just passed over the 12th kth data value, 12th in my example, so it must have been whatever value I just added on. So we need to check if what? Think about it. If total is greater than or equal to K, that means I just passed the data value, so that's what I should return. So what am I going to be returning? Well, remember what represents the data value? I. Okay. So based off of the precondition, K is supposed to be between bigger than 0 and less than the total number of values in the data collection. So this should be enough. But the problem is the computer is going to yell at you if you leave it like this, because it's going to be worried that, well, I know the precondition says this, but what if they give me a kth data value of 1,000,000? There is no millionth term. I still have to return something. So just outside, you have to kind of return something to be safe in case the person using the method messes up. What should I return that would kind of mean there was an error? I can't return any number 0 through however big the array is, but the way this is written, you'll never have a negative data value because there's never a negative index. So if I return -1, that'll kind of signify that there was some error that just happened. Okay, how's that look? Any questions on that? Well, that's definitely not the only way to do it. Some people might have thought to count down too. So instead of going up from 0, I could have started from K and counted off 12 values. So I could have done something like K minus equals tally. And once K went lower than 0, I knew I would have gone too far. So if that way made more sense to you, you could definitely go backwards also. This way is the way that seems most obvious to me. Okay, we got one more question. And for some reason, I have a little note in my notes that says test question here. So I just mentioned that to you just because, I don't know, maybe that'd be something good to look at before the next test. Up to you. Anyway, it says write the method median. And it sounds like median returns the median value of the data values in this collection. So we're still in the stats class. Now this next part you're going to start seeing, and you're going to see it in the homework that I talk about in a minute here. You can use kth data value that you wrote in part B, assume that the method kth data value works as intended regardless of what you wrote. That's a huge hint. That means you really should be using that if you're doing this method the best way. And you don't have to worry. If you're on the test and you totally screwed up kth data value, you can assume that whatever you wrote works correctly so that this method isn't screwed up. Okay, this one does want me to write everything. All right, so if I want to do the median, what does median mean? When you hear the word median, what do you think? Hopefully you're screaming middle. Median means middle. You'd be right. But if I have a list of data values, how do I find the middle? Well, that depends on how many data values, right? So there's kind of two cases. The median is the middle number if what? If there's an odd amount of data values. But if there's an even amount, what do? I count into the middle and I take the average of the two middle values. So average of two middle values if even amount of data. Okay, so let's kind of think of a couple cases. Here's the odd case. Let's say I've got 2, 2, 4, 5, 6. So to find the median, first off, they have to be ordered. And our data essentially is ordered, so we've still got that tally array. So if I'm going to use that kth data value, if there's an odd amount, so here in my example, there's 5 data elements. We've got the middle one is right here. And what value is that? What kth? If I count over 1, 2, 3, it's the third data value. So if I have 5 data values, how do I get 3? Okay, well, think about if I do the middle, if I take the number of data values, divide it by 2, what does that give me? What's 5 divided by 2 in computer science? It's 2.5 in math, but in computers it's 2, because remember it lops off the decimal. If I want the third data value, what would I have to do? I have to add 1. So basically I'm going to take the total number of data values, divide it by 2, and add 1. That's the k value I need. That's the kth data value. Okay, let's talk even. I've got an even amount of data. Like let's say I had 2, 2, 4, 5, 5, and 6. Where's the middle? It's right there. That's the 1, 2, third value and fourth value. So if I've got 6 data values, if I do 6 divided by 2, what do I get? 3. That's the one I wanted. So 6 divided by 2 plus 1 will give me 4. So if I have an even amount, I have to take total number divided by 2, so that data value, plus total number divided by 2 plus 1. That's the fourth data value. And then I take the average of those. So those data values divided by 2. All right, so that's kind of what I'm dealing with. Let's see if we can write that into code now. Now the method's supposed to be called median. So let's start writing this. It would have to be public what? Well, all my data values are ints, so should it just be a public int? Well, it can't be, because there's that chance, taking my example over here, the median value is 4.5 if I take the average of 4 and 5. So even if all my values are ints, the median could be a double. So watch out for that. The median has to be a public double. So public double median. And what info needs to get sent over? The array. You can call it tally, or I just called it A this time. Okay, don't forget your pre and post conditions. Precondition is an integer array, and it should be of frequencies still. So an integer array of frequencies of data values. Post condition. It returns the median of the data values. It's going to return it as a double, even if it ends up being an integer. Okay, so let's think. Is there any information I'm going to need in order to do this calculation? Well, in both of my examples up here, it all depended on how many total data values I had. How would I get that information? Well, if I flip back to this page one more time, here's all the data values. So I could count all of these up. There's 10 2s plus 5 3s plus 10 4s plus 7 6s. But how do I get that? Well, that comes from all these numbers right in my array. So the total number of data values is equal to the sum of all the values added up in this array. So those are the sum of the frequencies. Okay, so First, I need to figure out how many data values I have. So let's make an int, we'll call it int total again. Does that work? Int total equals 0. And that's because we need to know how many data values there are. So I'm just going to put a little comment off to the side. Need to know how many data values there are. And I'm going to do that by adding up all the frequencies. So I got to go through my array using a for loop. For int I equals 0, I is less than, I called it a this time, a dot length, I plus plus. So I want to add up all the values in my array. So total plus equals what? Think about what you want to do. You want to add up the values stored in the array. So that would be a bracket I. I would just be the index values. A bracket I is how many of them there are. Okay, now I know how many values there are. What I need to do next? I got to figure out what case I'm in. Let's do the easy one first. If I do the odd case, so if, how do I check if total is odd? If total mod 2 equals 1 or does not equal 0, either way is fine. This is where I would use kth data value. Remember, I'm returning the median. So I would want, we said in my example, the third data value when there was 5 elements. In general, it's the total number of elements divided by 2 plus 1, that data value. And that's easy because I can use kth data value to do that. So I can just say return kth data value Why don't I need an S1 dot? Because kth data value is in the same class, the stats class, as median. Let's go back and look at what kth data value is supposed to be given. An array and the number of data value I was looking for. What's my array called here? It's called A, because that's what I chose to call it. And the data value I want is what I figured out in my kind of hierarchy chart up here. The total number of elements divided by 2 plus 1. So total divided by 2 plus 1. You don't really need those extra set of parentheses around total divided by 2. It just kind of makes it look a little cleaner sometimes. Okay, so that's if there was an odd amount of data values. I just took the middle one. If there was an even one, we have to return the average of the two middle data values. Spelled return there. Let me try that again. Okay, so write small here. I might run out of room. I got to take the total divided by 2 data value. So that would be kth data value of array A, and the spot I want is the total divided by 2 spot. Take that value plus the value next to that. So I have to call kth data value again. Send it A, and the spot next to the middle spot would be total divided by 2 plus 1. This is where I ran out of room, but it's all that divided by the average. So what would I divide it by? Well, what's the problem if I divide it by 2? The problem is this is an integer and this is an integer. So if I want to get the true average, I can't divide by 2. I have to divide by, right, 2.0. Lots of tricks here. That's the end. All right, so a seemingly easy method, just finding the median, did take a little bit of work if you think about all the cases. All right, if you had any confusion on the end there, especially where I had to cram it in on the side there, you let me know, call me over. But before I end this video, let me draw your attention to another sheet you should have picked up, which was your arrays, classwork, and homework. So this is your next assignment. You should start working on this now if there's still time left, or if you're home and want to start working on it, you can. This is a intentionally tricky homework, so you should definitely be checking answers with me and going over it with me. There's some multiple choice, and some of them aren't too bad, but there are tricks to some of them too. And these are all questions that are really good questions to be looking at on upcoming tests. So there's 3 multiple choice, and there's a short answer. And it's all about kind of like how the stats class was written, where I had like multiple methods. First, we have to write a method called double position, which is basically looking at a character array and finding where the first double letter occurs. And then I'm going to move left. So I'm going to find a double position. Well, I'm going to move left from a certain spot. So given an array, I'm going to move this on top of each other. And there's examples that you can read through here. When you get to the last one, remove doubles, you see that same thing we've talked about before. Assume double position and move left. Work is specified regardless of what you wrote for parts A and B. Remove doubles, the last question in this homework assignment, should be really short. Really just a couple lines of code, because we're just going to use the other 2 methods that we wrote, kind of like how I just used kth data position in this median method. All right, so start working on this. Again, please ask me questions because it's intentionally tricky, so I want you to take time to really understand this homework before you turn it in. All right, that's it. Good luck.